If a Muslim mob shouting Allahu Akbar and shouting about the dirty pigs and rats in the Jewish neighborhood, if anyone criticizes that, is it Islamophobic or not?
This is really basic. Islamophobia is something which should be called out by every political leader. And the Prime Minister isn't calling it out because he's too weak.
Silent as Tommy Robinson, that right-wing thug, was described as a hero. Why is he allowing her to stand as a Tory MP at the next election?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't believe a single member of this House supports Tommy Robinson.
I have to take you back to Keir Starmer here because his response to the rise of anti-Semitism seems to be to speak more about the dangers of Islamophobia. Here he is with London Mayor Sadiq Khan doing just that.
One of the things that is coming up over and over again is Islamophobia. And, well, you can see the stats, you can see the numbers rising, particularly since October the 7th. Although we shouldn't fall into the trap of thinking that before October the 7th, this was all heading in the right direction. It's been far too high for far too long. Clearly, we need to just say over and over again, Islamophobia is intolerable. It can never, ever be justified, and we have to continue with a zero tolerance approach. And I think there's more we can do in government. There's certainly stuff online which I think needs tackling much more robustly than it is at the moment.
There you go, Douglas. We can look forward to more online censorship and campaigns to silence criticism that is deemed Islamophobic under Labor.
Keir Starmer has faced accusations of pandering to Islamic communities, particularly by some critics who claim he prioritizes addressing Islamophobia over anti-Semitism. These accusations suggest that his focus on Islamophobia is seen as an effort to gain favor with Muslim communities, possibly at the expense of confronting anti-Semitism with equal vigor. This has been a point of contention, especially among those who believe that both forms of discrimination should be tackled with the same level of commitment.
Yeah, I would just like to put to Keir Starmer what he would do about something like that attack I just referred to in Toronto last week. If a Muslim mob shouting Allahu Akbar and shouting about the dirty pigs and rats in the Jewish neighborhood, if anyone criticizes that, is it Islamophobic or not? Is it possible to call out Islamic anti-Semitism? Or would it be Islamophobic? He and the other people pushing this have to be able to answer that question. Is it Islamophobic to notice that the marches that have defiled the centre of London week after week since October are predominantly, very largely Muslim, and that many of the Muslims on those marches are saying intolerably racist things? Is it Islamophobic to point that out? They're going to have to work this out, because if they don't, it's just going to be a huge and colossal circular firing squad for the coming years, metaphorically speaking for now.
Accusations that Keir Starmer is pandering to Islamic communities by avoiding criticism of Islamic anti-Semitism suggest that his leadership may be influenced by a desire to secure political support from Muslim voters. This pandering is seen as prioritizing political gain over the principled stand against all forms of racism and bigotry, including anti-Semitism. The concern here is that by not addressing racist comments made by some individuals during these marches, Starmer is selectively applying principles of accountability. This selective approach could create a double standard, where certain groups are not held to the same standards of behavior as others. Ignoring such comments could lead to a perception that the Labour Party, under Starmer's leadership, is unwilling to confront racism within certain communities, particularly if doing so might alienate potential voters. By not addressing racist comments from any group, there is a risk of eroding social cohesion. If people feel that their concerns about racism are being ignored, or that some groups are being given a free pass, it can lead to increased tensions and a breakdown in trust between different communities. The phrase "recipe for disaster" implies that the current approach could have long-term negative consequences. If racist rhetoric from any group is not confronted, it may embolden others to express similar views, leading to an escalation of tensions. This could result in more frequent and more intense conflicts, both within communities and between different groups.
I fear that this most grave matter that we are discussing today and this afternoon has become a political row within the Labour Party, and that
I want to hear the point of order. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And that, regrettably, Mr. Speaker has inserted himself into that row with today's decision and undermined the confidence of this House in being able to rely on its long-established standing orders to govern its debates. Long-established conventions that should not be impaired by the current view of a weak leader of the opposition and a divided party. I would ask, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would ask that the Speaker take the opportunity to reassure all honourable and right honourable members that their Speaker, our Speaker, will not seek to undermine those rights in order to protect the interests of particular members, and that future Opposition Day debates will not be hijacked in this way. And I say this, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the benefit of all members.
Keir Starmer's leadership could be significantly impacted if he is seen as ignoring or downplaying racist behaviour from any group. This could lead to a loss of support from those who believe in the importance of confronting all forms of racism, regardless of the source. It could also provide ammunition to his political opponents, who might use this issue to question his commitment to equality and justice. For the Labour Party, this issue could have broader implications. If the party is perceived as prioritising certain communities' concerns over others, it could alienate a significant portion of the electorate. This could result in decreased support at the polls and challenges in building a broad-based coalition of voters.
And the lack of thought that people like Starmer have put into this, the pandering to communities, is, I think, a recipe for absolute disaster. You can stand up for the rights of all of your citizens to be able to live in peace. But that means standing up to hatred, wherever it comes from, of the most extreme kinds. And Keir Starmer would find it easy, I'm sure, like all of us, to stand up to any actual far-right extremism. Can he stand up to the Islamic extremists? We'll see.
Keir Starmer's accusations of pandering to Islamic communities and failing to stand up to Islamic extremists highlight significant concerns regarding his leadership and approach to sensitive issues within the UK. Douglas Murray's criticism of Islamic anti-Semitism and the subsequent labelling of such criticism as Islamophobic under Labour reflects a contentious issue in contemporary political and cultural discourse. Murray's stance is that certain elements within Islamic communities harbour anti-Semitic views, and addressing these views is crucial. However, under Labour's approach, this type of criticism can be perceived as Islamophobic, leading to accusations that the party is more concerned with protecting the image of the Muslim community than with confronting the issue of anti-Semitism. The failure to stand up to Islamic extremists is a serious accusation that raises questions about Starmer's leadership. Critics may argue that by not confronting extremism directly, he is failing to protect the broader public and uphold the values of democracy and tolerance. This could be seen as a significant weakness in his leadership, especially in the context of national security and social cohesion. Failing to address Islamic extremism could have direct implications for public safety. If extremists are not challenged, it could lead to an increase in radicalization and potentially more incidents of violence or terrorism. This concern is particularly acute in a multicultural society where the actions of a small minority can have widespread repercussions.
Gaza has, in many ways, woken us up on multiple levels. We've realized that the type of influence we may have believed we had here in the West, because of the influence of Muslims generally in society, may not be as conclusive as we had imagined. So many of the MPs, over 80% of MPs in Parliament, voted against the SNP, the Scottish Nationalists, they put forward an amendment to something called the King's Speech, and the amendment called for an immediate ceasefire. And a large number of MPs, in particular, by the way, MPs in very strong Muslim concentrated areas, these are largely Labour MPs, voted against a ceasefire.
Islamists have issued a list of 18 demands to Sir Keir Starmer, coupled with the threat of withholding their support at the next general election if these demands are not met, highlights the growing pressure on political leaders from specific interest groups. These demands include promises such as cutting military ties with Israel, allowing followers of Islam to pray in schools, and addressing the alleged issue of people with the name Muhammad being charged more for insurance. The demand to cut military ties with Israel is likely tied to the broader geopolitical conflict between Israel and Palestine. Many within the Muslim community feel strongly about this issue, and the pressure on Starmer to align with their stance could create significant political and diplomatic challenges. Fulfilling such a demand could alienate other voters who support Israel or prioritize strong military and diplomatic ties with the country. The demand to stop people named Muhammad from being charged more for insurance touches on issues of discrimination and fairness in financial services. Addressing this demand would require careful consideration of how to implement policies that ensure fairness without infringing on the practices of private insurance companies. If Starmer were to concede to these demands, it could secure the support of certain segments of the Muslim community. However, it might also provoke backlash from other voters who view these demands as unreasonable or as evidence of undue influence from Islamist groups. Starmer's response to these demands will likely shape public perception of his leadership. If he is seen as capitulating to specific interest groups, it could raise concerns about his ability to govern independently and make decisions that are in the best interest of all UK citizens. On the other hand, if he rejects the demands outright, he risks alienating a significant portion of Muslim voters.
This is really basic. Islamophobia is something which should be called out by every political leader. And the Prime Minister isn't calling it out because he's too weak.
Starmer's accusation that Sunak is too weak to address Islamophobia is a direct challenge to Sunak's leadership and could be aimed at creating a contrast between the two leaders. By framing Sunak as lacking the strength to take on such issues, Starmer attempts to position himself as the more decisive and morally committed leader. Starmer's criticism of Sunak could influence voter perceptions leading up to future elections. If voters perceive Starmer as the stronger leader on social justice issues, it could sway undecided voters or those who are dissatisfied with Sunak's leadership. The dynamic between criticizing Islamic anti-Semitism and the accusations of Islamophobia under Labour highlights the challenges of addressing complex social issues in a multicultural society. Douglas Murray's critique points to a broader debate about the limits of free speech, the risk of political pandering, and the potential consequences for social cohesion. For Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, this issue presents a significant challenge in maintaining credibility and trust across different communities while ensuring that all forms of discrimination are addressed effectively.